I want to start with a story from the suttas it's pretty famous and you've probably heard it before. And it's the story of a woman called Kisa Gotami. And she is a woman, she lived in the time of the Buddha, and she had a child. She had one son, and when he was about 1 or 2 years old, he had an accident and he was killed. And she was so distraught, she couldn't acknowledge that reality. And she believed that he was perhaps just unconscious or just very ill. And so she was going everywhere trying to find someone to help her bring her baby back. And her family, her neighbors, everyone was going, he's dead. And she's like, no, 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 that's not true. And she had heard about the Buddha and he was staying in a village nearby. So she left, she went to find him and she said, can you help me? She told him the story and she said, can you help me? And he said, of course I can help you. He said, but I need you to go and I need you to bring me a mustard seed from a home in the village. Go to the village, go to knock on doors, bring me a mustard seed, but bring me a mustard seed from a home that has not experienced death. So she went door to door, and mustard seed, very common. She goes, do you have a mustard seed? And they're like, yeah, we got plenty. And she said, have you experienced death? And of course, every house she went to was, yes, yes, grandfather died last week. Yes, this, that, of course, because we all have that experience. And what that did for her was to help her have that insight of, oh, this is the way it is. And she was able to recognize that her son had died and that it's part of the human condition. It wasn't anything special. And what she went back to the Buddha, and he said to her, a person who has not understood the nature of reality may live for 100 years, but far more valuable is just a single day of life for a person who has understood the nature of reality. So if we're walking around deluded, we're not present. And you know that. You drive past your freeway off ramps, I do, or do things you're not, why did I walk into the kitchen? You know, that type of thing, because we're not paying attention. And it's better to live wholeheartedly for a single moment than to drift aimlessly for many years. And so what this story invites us to do is to actually turn towards reality. It's a tragic story, but sometimes you need something like a 2x4 up the side of the head to say, hey, come back from where you are. And it's challenging because it invites us to be open to some of the most difficult moments of our life. And that's what the issue is because we are often not interested in being present for those really difficult moments of life. The Buddha in the First Noble Truth said there is dukkha, there is suffering, there's birth, there's death, there's loss, there's being separated from what we love. It's gonna happen to everyone. But when it happens to us in our lives, we're like, oh, there's got to be another way. What can I do not to experience this? And there's a teacher named Larry Ward, who I love, love, love. He was a student of Thich Nhat Hanh and then became a colleague of Thich Nhat Hanh. And he does a Zoom talk once a month, and it was Wednesday night, and I was at the talk, and he quoted Thich Nhat Hanh. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, when you know how to suffer, you suffer less. When you know how to suffer, you suffer less. When you become familiar with the human condition, when you recognize the reality of the moment and you're not fighting it, then it's not as painful. It's like, okay, right now it's like this. Okay, this is what's happening. It's not a denial of pain. It's not a spiritual bypass. It's oh yeah, it's like this. How can I be with the reality that's here instead of fighting it? It's the aversion that intensifies it and makes it worse. And I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it. It's like, that's not going to help. That's just going to make it worse. So if you can be present with it, and I think of that very simple example of if you hit your elbow on something, like if I hit my elbow on the back of this chair, what's the first response or the first reaction is, ugh, is this tension, this tightness. It's like, what are you, dummy, again? But then you stop and you go, oh, just let it be. It shifts the whole experience. It doesn't mean the pain goes away. But it's a very, I invite you, if you haven't tried that, try that. It's amazing the difference with something as simple as that. So go home. No, don't go home and, smack yourself. But if it happens, see if you can remember. So that's what we're doing in this practice. That's why we sit and stay present for whatever shows up. I like to call it resting in awareness. We're resting in this awareness. I didn't come up with that term, but I like to use it. And Kisa Gautami was caught in this terrible suffering and grief, and she couldn't bear the reality of it. But when she realized it was the human condition, it became she had a different relationship with it. The intensity of her aversion disappeared and she could be with it. And Larry also said, and I love this, he says, it gets better when you relax. It may not improve, but it gets better. And that, if you think about as a little example I just gave about hitting your elbow, when I relax into it, it doesn't necessarily get better, but it improves. How can I be with the reality of this moment, which is really helpful right now, because the reality of this moment is like, whoa. So it's important to learn how to do that. And this is where my mind goes. As I'm thinking about all of this week, I said, well, the next step or the next thing that came to mind was the idea of joy. Makes sense for that to be the next step. Why not? And in fact, Larry's last line in his talk the other night was, joy is possible in the midst of suffering and without ignoring the suffering. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that joy is possible regardless of what's going on. And oftentimes we postpone it saying, I can't because this is happening, instead of recognizing the joy that's right here. And I like to talk about joy. I don't know if I talk about it a lot. I kind of give a joy talk a couple of times a year. But I often say, don't miss the joy that's always present, that you can access. How can we feel joy? I like this. How can we feel joy when facing loss, uncertainty, or hardship? But the Buddha taught that joy is like the other wholesome qualities, and it's not dependent on external circumstances. All my ducks don't have to be in a row for me to have joy. Because when are all of our ducks ever in a row? There's always one. And if that one would just do what it was supposed to do, then I could have joy. But it's never going to happen. This is the reality of the human condition. There may be moments, of course, but then impermanence, nothing lasts. So why postpone what's actually present right now? And another thing to remember is that it's not the same as pleasure or excitement. It's a deeper and steadier experience that's rooted in our clarity, rooted in seeing things for what they are. Right now, it's like this. The first factor of the Eightfold Path is wise view, seeing clearly, understanding the Four Noble Truths, understanding that there is dukkha, there is discomfort, there is death, there is loss, but there's also happiness, there's also joy. There's both sides of this. So how can we be present actually right now, what's happening in this moment. We practice being fully present, you know, and acknowledge right now it's difficult. This is a challenging moment. This is painful right now. There's a lot of loss right now, or this is really joyful right now in the moment. It rained a little bit in LA last night. I don't know if it rained out here. And as I was driving today, I got this morning, the sky was gorgeous. The clouds were white and puffy. It's beautiful here. The hills are clear. The light this time of year in the desert is stunning. Don't miss that. And yesterday I was going somewhere and there are two songs in a row on the radio that I loved. And I was like so happy because I was singing. And it was like, wow, this is a moment of joy. This is a moment of joy, being fully present in that moment, you know? Joy can emerge, what's this line? Not from the crisis itself, but from the courage to meet it with presence. You know, we can meet whatever's happening with presence. So, last year, I think it was last December or last January, I set a little intention for myself. I have a pile of books at home. I don't know about you, but I got a pile of books I haven't read. And I said, okay, this year, every day, I'm going to take a half hour out of my day, maybe in the afternoon, and read and start reading. I didn't send this usual, I'm going to read a book a week or whatever. I'm just going to read every day, start getting through these. So when I set that intention, I went, and I ran at it. I bought a bunch more books. I don't know why, but I did, because that's how I work. And so I just want to share a couple of the books I bought. One of them is called Joy is My Justice, and by Tanmeet Sethi. She's a doctor. And I just want to read a couple of the things she wrote about joy, because I think they're really, really, oh, I didn't show you the book. Yeah. She talks about the joy is not necessarily about feeling better, but about feeling more. There's more connection when we can be present, not only to others, but to ourselves. So if I had not been present, if I had been lost in thinking about it, what if only them, blah, 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 I would have missed the beautiful sky. I would have missed that amazing moon last week, that full moon that was so stunning. Or the light this time of year. I just love going outside around dusk, because the clouds and the light, and it's like, whatever brings you joy. And she said, it's not necessarily the same as happiness, as I touched on that. And it's not a commodity that we buy. I mean, we can do things that are joyful, like going to a spa or something, but that's not necessarily the same thing. And she says, joy is a touchstone. And I think this is really important. Joy is a touchstone that you can come back to over and over. It's an infinite inner resource. She says, you don't have to be joyful all the time. I sure as hell am not. You just need to know how to access joy. When you stray from it, it's not a failure. And I talked a couple of weeks ago, I gave a talk, I think the last time I was here, on resourcing. And it's knowing what you can access to support yourself in times of trauma, perhaps, or in times of agitation. When something's going on, what can you connect with? Maybe it's petting a fuzzy critter in your house. Maybe it's a memory of a time. Maybe it's thinking about when you did something or other. Maybe it's whatever it is, you have to recognize what brings you joy. Do you even know? And I think that's really important, because it's a resource that we can use when times are challenging. I used to think that stuff was fake and phony. Or you're cheating, because that's how I thought. It's like, that's cheating. And it's like, no, it's not. It's actually wise. It's really wise and skillful. And it's really, I think it really fits in with the Buddha's, the wise action. The first precept And the first piece of the wise action in the Eightfold Path is A, not intentionally kill, not intentionally cause harm, but cultivate compassion. Cultivate kindness. That's being compassionate towards yourself. If you can access those moments in the present, it's really beneficial. And she says it doesn't negate the truth of the anger or the fear or the grief. It's not denial, but it's being present for what's here and taking care of yourself. And I 40 years ago now, 44 years ago, my brother passed away. He's very young, and I was back in Jersey for the funeral, and I tell this story a lot because it was really profound for me. In the morning when the funeral, and really sad, really grief, a lot of grief and sadness and tears. And then that afternoon or that evening, we were in the backyard with the family, laughing our butts off, telling stories. And I remember thinking, am I a bad sister because I'm laughing? And he just got buried today. And it's like, no, this is what's present. We had so much joy in telling those stories. Why deny that? It's really important. And then another book I bought called Joyfully Just. Joyfully Just. I don't know what happened, but I bought these books. By Camilla Majid, also a PhD. And she says, and this is really important, she says, as we begin to see and face clearly and deeply, and perhaps for the first time, all that we could not see and face before, we become more free and thus more joyful. In Buddhism, emancipation from delusion is itself enlightenment. As the renowned Buddhist educator, poet, and philosopher Daisaku Ikeda states, the joy of life is to be found not by evading life's sufferings, but by grappling with them to the finish. Escapism cannot produce true happiness. Happiness based on delusion does not last. Enlightenment comes from seeing the truth, no matter how unpleasant it can be. It may be. Being fully present is where the joy is, even when it's unpleasant. I am so grateful that I don't hide anymore. Because when we are fully present, we are fully alive. We're feeling more. You know, we used to try and hide from and put armor and build up not hurting. What do I have to do to not hurt? The problem is you don't just block out the hurt, you also black out the joy, because that armor keeps everything out. And I talk about living with an undefended heart, which is chipping away at that armor, how to be more open. And that offers connection. Because when we're armored, there's a real sense of isolation. And we yearn for connection. It's as important. Connection is as important as food and water and shelter. I can't remember the citation of that, but I know I read that there was a study. And it is important. And so to be connected and to be connected to everybody else, like Kisa Gotami became connected to everyone else and their experience of loss and grief. Joy is one of the 7 factors of awakening. So the Buddha points out how important it is. Mindfulness, being present. This is the factors of awakening. Mindfulness, investigation, curiosity. What is this? Not what story is my head telling me, but what's the actual experience right now? Effort, staying here, coming back, being willing to let go of the stories about, I want this is right, this is wrong, this is bad, this is good. What is this right here? How can I be with it? And when we've been able to connect with reality, what happens is this joy, this ease that we have in the present moment, even when it sucks. Because I'm sure you've had those moments like shit's hitting the fan, but you can be at ease. Okay, right now it's like this. How do I work with this? What are the next steps maybe to take in this situation? And then from that joy, there's this tranquility, this collectedness of mind, and ultimately equanimity. This equanimity is the ability to be present for our experience without preference, to be right where we are. And then, actually, I've had this book for 15 years, so I didn't buy it in January. It's Awakening Joy by James Barris. And James Barris is a teacher up in Spirit Rock. And he teaches this course, Awakening Joy, every year. And I took it, I've actually taught this course. And it's really solidly Dharma based. And I actually like just reading the table of contents. He says, the first thing you need to do, how do we get to this joy? There's the 7 factors, but if we're walking through our lives, how do we get there? Incline the mind, set an intention to open to joy. Because if we're like, no, joy, put it on the back burner. It's like if you get a new car and then all you see anywhere is that car. And it's like, nobody was driving this yesterday. And now that I have one, everybody's driving it. Same thing. If you incline your mind, I want to, where is joy? And again, it can be so simple. Watching a baby, nap. That can be joyful. Find your joy. He talks about gratitude. That's why it's important. Gratitude, Rick Hanson talks about gratitude, who wrote Buddha's Brain. Gratitude has a beneficial impact on the brain. So taking a few moments to recognize what you're grateful for. Because if we don't, it's so easy to not be grateful at all, because when stuff's going bad, it's like we become focused on that. I had this one line here that the focus is on that. When things are really difficult, the mind creates all these stories of what's going to happen and, oh my God, and blah, blah, blah. It kind of goes back to the reptilian brain, fight, flight, or freeze, and looking out for danger. But we can move beyond that. It's like, okay, that's the natural reaction, but we have the capacity to shift that. Bring some gratitude in. Again, it can be simple. Gratitude that I got new windshield wipers for my car, which is why it didn't really rain a lot today, but I'm ready. So I'm so grateful for those. Awareness. We can't do anything without awareness if we're not paying attention. We're lost in our thinking. So mindfulness, sati. Sati also means be with, being with the moment. And then he talks about the bliss of blamelessness, which is a chapter which I love, because, that's living in a way that doesn't cause harm. That's a whole section of the Eightfold Path, ethics, sila. How do we live in a way that doesn't cause harm? Making it safe for others to be around us, because we know when we do things intentionally, if we're causing harm, if we're gossiping, stealing, all those things, whatever it is we're doing kind of intentionally, a lot of times there's that icky feeling inside, and it's tough to access joy when we've got this little bit of remorse or guilt in there. I was at a coffee shop yesterday and I saw this pin and I bought it. It said, be a nice human. It's a low bar. But how can you be a nice human? And we're going to cause trouble. We're going to cause suffering. We're going to do that because we're human beings and we're not perfect. I'm not dead, so I'm not done. But we don't intentionally do that. We have this path the Buddha laid out for us, how to walk through the world wisely. And when we do that, again, there's more capacity to experience joy. What we're doing is we're creating the conditions to allow joy in. And then the heart practices, cultivating metta, loving kindness, cultivating compassion, So important to do that for ourselves, for others, softening the heart. It's actually, the Buddha didn't teach those traditional phrases of loving kindness. What's in the suttas is this insight practice. The natural arising is the heart qualities. The people in abide with a heart and mind, 1/4 loving kindness, 1/4 compassion, 1/4 appreciative joy, 1/4 equanimity. It's a natural arising of our awareness, of our mindfulness practice. And then finally, James talks about the joy of simply being. And this is a quote from someone who took his course. When I stop to appreciate a flower, the weight drops from my shoulders. I settle and get quiet, and I feel spacious and expanded inside. And he says, that was the person. And then James continues. He says, it's not that we have to do anything special, but rather we stop striving. You can drop into this relaxed, effortless presence at any time while listening to music, soaking in a hot bath, meditating, or sipping a cup of tea. It happens when we set aside the judging mind that separates us from the moment, and it arises when we realize we have nowhere to go but here. Just be present. And a couple of weeks ago, someone mentioned, in a class I was in, someone mentioned a book, and they said it was one of the best Buddhist books they've ever read. And it's called The Book of Joy by Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. I don't have that one yet, so I'll get that one though. Somebody last night said they'd send it to me because they had it. So joy is a part of who we are. It's a part of what we want to cultivate, to allow into our lives. And when you create the conditions for it, just as the heart practices arise, when you create the conditions, there's a natural arising of joy as well. So don't miss the joy. It's so necessary right now. It's so necessary right now with everything that's going on and with the doom scrolling that we tend to do. It's really important to have the balance because it's always present. You may not always be in it, but learn how to access it. And when I was working on this talk the other day, I have a lot of my talks on my laptop, and so I did a search for Kisa Gotami because I knew I talked about her. I gave a talk on that a couple of years ago, and what came up was this piece, and I went, "Oh, this is from 2021." It was, and I go, "Oh, this is nice. I wonder who wrote this." And then I realized I wrote it. It was from I took a writing class from Barry Center for Buddhist Studies back in 2021. You know, when we were all taking those online courses because there was nothing else to do. I had never baked bread because I don't like sourdough, but I did this course. So I just want to read this. It's called Kisa Gotami. Where is the mustard seed that will bring my child back to life? Where is the cure for reality? What do I have to do not to suffer? How can I avoid sickness, old age, and death? Are there words I can say? Are there rituals I can perform? Are there songs I can sing? Share the magic with me. Help me to find something, please. But you have nothing to give, no enchanted phrase, no talisman or amulet to ward off life and death, sorrow and pain. I hear it said that for there to be joy, there must be sadness. If there is pleasure, there is pain. If I win, then I must also lose. I do not want what is. I do not want it to be this way. But there is no choice, and I will never win this fight with reality. There is sickness, there is old age, there is death. There is no way around. There is only through. I will go through. I will open to this moment. I will be deeply intimate with my experience without preference. This openness, this intimacy, this presentness is where freedom is. I hear it said that for there to be joy, there must be sadness. If there is pleasure, there is pain. It is all one. Let it be so, and let me be here for it all. Let there be joy. So I invite you to recognize where the joy is, to recognize the suffering and recognize the joy. Recognize there's both. It's who we are as human beings. There can't be anything different. When we fight that reality, that makes it even worse. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, learn how to suffer. You won't suffer so much. So thank you so much, my friends, for being here, for your kind attention, and find your joy. And so that's all I have, but I'm happy to hear any questions you might have. I'd love to hear where your joy is. Take a moment, reflect on that. What's your joy? Mine is cats and music and baseball. And my husband. In case he's listening, I need to throw him in there too. He won't listen to this. And sees candy. I can keep going, so I better stop now. Yeah. So thank you. As I mentioned at the outset, we have 4 groups a week, this one in person, the rest online. You can find that info on the website. There's yummy treats in the back. Juan Felipe, thank you so much for bringing something every week. And I brought some little baby black and whites because I'm a New Yorker and New Yorker. And then if you want to sign up to volunteer here, we have somebody each week do setup and such. You can sign the volunteer sheet back there. That would be really helpful for us. There are 2 baskets. There are Dharma baskets. One is for ICD, for Insight Community of the Desert, to help us pay rent, to help us move forward into the next year. The other one is for the teacher. And so you can see the difference there. Also, it's the end of the year. And if you're thinking about year-end contributions, I invite you to think about ICD. I think Giving Tuesday is not this Tuesday, it's the next Tuesday. You can find on our website, there's a donate button. That's a way to make a year-end contribution. We'll also be sending out something to remind you in case you forget. And then I'm going to do something bad. I'm going to tell you something that has nothing to do with ICD, but my very dear friend Beth Lapidus, who has done this, produced this show Uncabaret in Los Angeles for almost 30 years. She's doing a show here in Palm Springs on Friday called It's a Lot. And so if you're not doing anything Friday night, ask me and I'll tell you where it is. I've seen it twice. It's great. I wish I could come, but I can't be 2 places at once, although I try. So that's my outside issue announcement. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. I'm not sure who's here next week, but somebody will be here next week. Have a lovely holiday. Have a beautiful holiday, remembering the gratitude of the holiday. And the connection. It can be difficult for some people, but I hope you find some ease in this season. And remembering that we don't just practice for our own benefit, but we practice for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free. Thanks, y'all. And I'll see you next time.